People who are experts in computers and the internet tell users that the internet that they use is only about 1% of everything else. As for the other 99%, well, let's just say the majority of the stuff there is nothing you should browse for. Don't do any of the stuff that I tell you about. Don't research about it either. And don't even consider doing anything regardless of this at all. It's best to learn from those who have already been there. You should think twice before you go there yourself. The first time I used the web was when I was still in college, and at the time, I was on my last 2 weeks before I can finally graduate and start a new chapter in my life. During the time of which I should have been studying for my exams, I had grown curious about the dark web. I have seen various videos of people browsing the dark web with the browser called Tor, an anonymity browser that users can use to browse the other 99% of the internet without being tracked. I often watch a YouTube channel called Browsing with Taylor as the best source of information about the pros and the cons of using the dark web. He gave tips such as the various anti-malware software, virtual machines, VPNs, and creating multiple various accounts to prevent any attacks from anyone. I used his knowledge and applied it to my own, doing everything I could to mentally prepare for this unknown digital world. On my free time, I would use websites to further my knowledge in other internet-related desktop apps and tools, such as the virtual machines. I also read more about an operating system called Tails, which is an operating system that was created by the developers of Tor and the Onion route that runs specifically for Tor for complete protection from DDoS attacks or any other internet-related hacks. As the last 2 weeks of college came to an end, I was finally stocked in information about everything in regards to the dark web and began my journey into the unknown. I installed a virtual machine to use as a trial test for these things I come across, and when I thought browsing through the virtual machine was safe enough, I went ahead and installed Tails. After 10 minutes of installing and setting up Tails, I explored every feature the operating system had to offer me. I knew at that point that I was safe enough to browse the internet using what some of these dark web experts have explored, so I did. From the virtual machine, I opened up Tor, and as an experiment, I went to YouTube to search up my favorite internet guy, Browsing with Taylor. Everything seemed fine until I realized that what I searched up wasn't quite deep enough. So I looked at my favorite YouTuber, using her first and last name in the search, and pressed enter. I knew in an instant the search on the Tor was completely different from what I was used to searching up. There were many different sites that had hidden information about my favorite YouTuber, such as her full name, her age, ethnicity, and worse. Some of these sites revealed her birth certificate and secret photos of her and her address. These types of information were quite valuable, and whoever sees this information has whatever he or she needs to be able to ruin this person's life. I wanted to make sure that the information about Tor had nothing about me. I wanted it to be gone, clean, with a rapid breath, rapid heartbeat, and trembling hands. I entered my full name. And there it was. Links, photos, and videos of everything I posted on social media, websites, and some from my computer. Wait a minute. Photos from my computer. With absolute fear, I clicked on the Images tab in the search, and there it revealed. Photos I took from my desktop computer, of which I don't remember taking. Or maybe I did? With a quick jerk towards the computer screen, I jumped in terror at the sight of the thing that was in front of me. The indicator for the built-in computer on my monitor was on. I screamed as I tried finding a way to cover myself to prevent anyone from recording my face and posting it online. I couldn't find any tape to cover the camera, so I looked like an absolute fool in front of who knows how many people were watching me online. This lasted for about a minute, until I heard a ping from my computer. Frantically, I moved the cursor and clicked on the random things on my screen to try to find out where the source of that sound came from. There came another ping. A small window at the left bottom corner of my screen popped up, and with another jump, I yelled. There was a message with various usernames such as TorSH3, Anonymous, Spy_61. The message said, as I read with fear, "Quite a show you put on for us." Below that was another message that said, "Too bad you found out about this now. Now the show is officially over." There was a reply box at the foot of the message box. I typed in a reply, which I was about to say, "What show? Why are you watching me?" But I was interrupted with a voice on my computer, which I, once again, jumped to. The voice was deep, but audible. It said, "We've been watching you for a couple of years now. As much as we wanted to watch more about you, you discovered our hiding spot." I was about to type in a reply again to the anonymous users, but the same voice said, "No, don't type it out. For God's sake, just speak." I thought to myself. I replied with my trembling voice, You can hear me?" "Well, duh. How can we watch something so interesting without some of the sweet, clear audio?" said the voice. "This is dumb. Why did I do this?" I asked myself. I attempted to move the cursor so that I could close the Tor browser and then close the virtual machine I was using, but I started to panic again, as the cursor did nothing but sit where it was when I started chatting with these anonymous users. "You can't hide from us," the voice said again. "Yes, I can," I screamed as I used Control-Alt-Delete on the computer to force close the virtual machine application. But still, nothing happened. "You can do all you like, but if you should know that we will find you again," said the voice with a sinister chuckle. "Yeah? How so?" I laughed back. "You only hacked my computer. All I have to do is keep this computer off. Then you won't be able to watch me anymore." "Well, that's one way," said the voice. "But we still have your address, so..." "You what?" I shouted. Without thinking, I held down on the power button of my computer. Then while it was off, I unplugged it from the power outlet, then opened it up with a screwdriver. I used the tool again to unscrew every component in the computer and piled it with other parts. I was sweating excessively and panting so hard, it made it seem like I was going to pass out. Now I know somewhere out there, 3, maybe more people have my address and are tracking me down at this moment as I sat there in fear. No, Dan," I said to myself. "This is all just a bad dream. Wake up, and it'll be all over." I began to hyperventilate again, almost about to faint once more, but then I began to focus and think about what I should do. Call the police? Then what? Tell them that I was just browsing what was supposed to be kept secret from everyone else? Not a smart move. It needs to have been a better plan than that. Still sitting on the floor of my apartment, trembling, I thought of ways that I could handle this life-threatening situation. Then it suddenly came to me. I live in an apartment. I can move out of this and live somewhere else. I can finally be safe from whoever it was that was tracking me. Before I did anything else, I destroyed every computer component I had unscrewed and then drilled holes in them, before smashing them to pieces with a hammer to reduce chances of being found. Who knows who will find these components and use it to their advantage if I just left them in one piece. A few weeks have gone by, and after that incident with the virtual machine and tour, I found myself a new apartment to unload and start with a fresh, new start. I got myself a new computer too, the one with the best components and best computer performance. Only this time, there are no built-in cameras or microphones at all. This is only to reduce chances of anyone, including those hackers, from seeing my face or hearing my voice. But it's not just that I had changed. Yes, I still use virtual machines, but no, I do not use any operating systems that use the dark web, especially Tails. I also stayed away from Tor. I sure as hell don't want to use that thing again. Not ever. And since I moved to this new apartment, I have also wondered who those hackers could be. Could they have found my new address, hacked into one of my numerous fake accounts and tried to find hints to my whereabouts? They could still be looking for me, but who knows? But one thing's for sure. I'm safe. At least, for now. This didn't happen to me, but it was my older brother and sister. My brother and sister were at my grandma's house, and were in a circle doing some ritual. Not sure what it really was, but Sophia, not her real name, wanted to prove that there was a guardian following and protecting her. She said when she was in the room, she felt like if somebody was there and saw an old friend that died when she was like about 8, 3rd grade, something like that. He died from drowning in the lake near where my grandmother's house was. She says that she was speaking to him. Then he just disappeared one time, and she heard, "I can't have people looking at me." She saw her grandma looking confused. She thought nothing of it. Anyways, back to the story. During this, Sophia was 12, and there was 5 people. None of these are their real names. Nathan, Sophia, Mike, John, and Jenny. They all looked down. No eyes were open. Sophia said, "Do you think you will be okay with this?" They all heard, "As long as they don't look." Nathan looked as well, and Jenny. They saw a ghost figure hugging and kissing Sophia. They were in shock, but they felt like throwing up after. They all got out of the room. Sophia was still in the room. However, she was talking to the figure. About 6 years later, she said that he has to go now because she has turned 18 and could protect herself, and that if he stayed any longer, he would be trapped in the house. So she let it go. She still remembers him. I don't know his name, but I hope that he took care of her and didn't turn her insane. She's about 22 now. She moved out when she was 19, and I don't talk to her much. I was told about this when I was 8, and I had some creepy stuff happen. Nothing big though. Just weird noises. That's it. When I was younger, probably around 9 years old, I went to a small school in a tiny country town. This town has a history of death and sadness, as it was a major site for the yellow fever deaths, as well as lynchings and the KKK. Needless to say, there were many stories passed around about how this building or that building was haunted. While I lived in this town, my family had a number of weird things happen to them, almost everywhere that we went. So essentially, this is a very true story. As a small child, I truly believed the existence of the paranormal phenomenon, and my school seemed to be the perfect setting for numerous stories. One day in particular, while we were in PE and all of our classmates were playing kickball. A group of friends and I were sitting up in the bleachers, swapping theories about what could have happened in this particular gymnasium. Mind you, this gym was very old. The lights were dim, the windows and the paint all over it, cracking, stained. Everything seemed like it was basically broken, and the school didn't have any money to replace it. The area where we were sitting was particularly dim, and was definitely perfect for our stories. While I took my turn, one of my friends noticed that one part of the bleachers were slightly different than the rest. These bleachers weren't the typical type that you would see at the schools. Rather than being made out of metal and plastic, these were made out of wood, and they looked solid. What my friend noticed was that the section of these bleachers were hinged, but they had been nailed shut. He called us over there, and we inspected it. We quickly decided that we needed to see what we could do, to see what was hidden in there. Fueled by all of our theories of murder and secrets, we started trying to pry this thing open, which proved that it was easier since the nails and the wood were old as dirt. Lucky for us, the gym was very loud and the teachers were preoccupied with a student who had gotten hit in the head with one of the balls, and they were wailing about how much it hurt. We peered down into this darkness, which was about 10 feet down, and we were allowed only a small square of light, let in by these dim bulbs, and what we saw chilled us to the bone. It looked like a small body, wrapped in tarps and covered with roof shingles. We immediately ran to the gym teacher to get his help, but he didn't believe us. He knew that we were always telling scary stories, and were always scaring ourselves. He disregarded it as a childhood imagination. He convinced us that we were just paranoid, and that we should just go and forget about it. So we did. We were pretty naive kids, so we felt it was wise to just believe the adults. Toward the end of the same year, when we were taking our TAKS tests, my teacher told us that in between each section, we could get up, stretch, take a walk around the building, get some water, etc., and then we would come back and finish our test. To go around this building, we had to walk through the gym. Now, when I was younger, I was a major overachiever and finished the first section of the test before everyone else. I was excited to go walk because I hated the test and liked to go out and explore my school. As I walked into the gym, toward the water fountain, I heard someone whisper really close to my ear, "Over here." I was startled and looked everywhere, but I didn't see anyone. Who could have said anything? There was no one. I turned to continue my walk, and I saw something in the corner of my eye. It looked like a small girl with long blonde hair up in the bleachers. I quickly turned to look at the spot, but nothing was there. I started feeling myself hyperventilating, but having been an avid watcher of these scary films, even that young, I knew I shouldn't stay there. Luckily, at that moment, one of my classmates walked into the gym, also on his walk. I decided that maybe it was him whispering, trying to scare me, as it was easier to believe than allowing myself to be scared. I haven't been back to that school in over 15 years, so I still don't know if that thing is still at the bottom of the bleachers. When I was about 5, I'm 13 now, my family lived in a house that was built over 100 years ago. I only ever saw one strange thing in the house. I was in my bed. I had a bunk bed at the time. And as usual, my parents were downstairs, and the landing light was on. My bedroom light was off. I remember it was quite late. I was just about to drift off when I heard the landing light click off. I opened my eyes to see that the light was off. It wasn't just my imagination. I was confused because I could still hear both of my parents talking downstairs and the only time that it goes off is when they flip it off. Then something caught my eye. By the door of my dark bedroom, I saw a lady wearing a posh dress, or rather, a shadow of a posh lady wearing a dress. Just the shadow. In my young age, I assumed that the shadow was my mother. "Mom," I said quietly. The shadow advanced towards me. "Mom," a bit louder. It was then I could tell. This was not my mother. I screamed, causing my parents to run upstairs. They entered my room and turned the light on, and the shadow disappeared. I'm not lying. I know what I saw. And that was the only time that I saw it. Another thing to note is that this house had a basement that got sealed before we moved in. I have more questions than answers, but I'm sure that something happened in that basement back when it was built. And that shadow had something to do with it. Please, I don't know what to do. I've tried to tell my wife about this, but she's a science teacher, and thanks to my history of practical jokes, she thinks I'm just kidding. There is something stalking me. I don't know what it wants, but almost every night since I started seeing it, it has terrified me. It doesn't touch me. It doesn't communicate in any sort of way. It just fills me with horror. If I seem to ramble, please forgive me. I haven't slept in several days. We live in the second floor of a duplex with stairs that go down the back of the house to the basement where the laundry machines are. There's a door at the bottom of the stairs before the door to the basement that looks out onto our back porch and into our backyard. 6 days ago, I was going down to the basement to bring some laundry, and I glanced out the door as I passed. There was a figure standing in the far edge of our yard. Her back was to me. She was just standing there, looking into the woods beyond our yard. She was dressed in nothing but a light gown. It had lots of flowing material coming off of it that were just whipping around in the air slowly. The whole scene just creeped me out instantly. But I thought she might be a friend of our downstairs neighbors, so I continued to the basement. When I came back up, she wasn't there. The next night, I went down again, and as I passed that back door, I looked outside. The woman was back. She was exactly like she was the night before, facing away, not moving. The hair on my arms and neck stood up straight when I saw her. I was even more creeped out when I realized that it was the same exact clothes from the night before. That's when I did something that I really shouldn't have. I opened the back door, leaned out. I called to her to see if she was okay. She didn't respond. She didn't make any sort of indication that she had heard me. It was freezing cold, so I shut the door and locked it. Coming back upstairs afterward, I looked out the window, and she was gone. Later that same night, I was in the bedroom getting ready to go to sleep. Everything was dark because my wife had already gone to bed before me. Our bedroom looks out over the backyard, and my side of the bed faces the window, so I have to go past them to get in. As I was doing so, I suddenly got that deep dread feeling in my stomach that I had gotten the first time that I saw the figure in the backyard. Something compelled me to hesitate by the window. My hands were shaking as I pulled the curtain back a bit, and I peeked through the shades into the backyard. It was a clear night. The backyard was not shrouded in darkness. The woman was standing in the middle of the backyard, no longer on the edge of the woods, facing the house. Then her head tilted up and looked directly at my window as I was peeking from it. I jerked away instantly, afraid she had seen me. Her face was covered in shadow and hair, but I saw her chin and nose. A sharp nose and a thin chin. Gray. Her skin looks gray, I think. Her hair was black and long. I was so scared I jumped immediately into the bed, covered myself with the covers. The next day, I played outside in the snow with my 4-year-old daughter. She wanted me to pull her on her sled in the backyard, but just the thought of going back there really did scare me again. So I talked her into just digging holes in the snow in the front yard. That night, things went from bad to worse. Somehow I managed to forget about the woman. Then in the middle of the night, my daughter started crying. Our bedroom is just across the hall from hers. I thought she might need to use the bathroom or something. Or maybe she's just having a bad dream. So I went into her room to see if she was okay. She was uncovered, curled into a ball on her mattress. I pulled her covers back over her, and that's when she whispered to me, "Daddy, there's someone in my closet." Instant goosebumps. I turned my head slowly towards the closet door at the end of her bed. Normally the closet is shut, but now it was open. The woman was standing in my daughter's closet. Not even when it was clear that I saw her did she move or make a sound. Just stood there and looked at me through the cracked open door. My blood ran cold as I saw her. "Get up," I told my daughter. "Get in my arms, quickly. Quickly." She scrambled up and hugged me tightly, and I walked backward out the room, watching the closet the entire time. In my mind, I imagined her throwing open that closet door and running at us, arms outstretched. I just hugged my daughter and walked backward into my room. The woman never appeared in the doorway. I heard no movement from my daughter's room. I tucked her into bed and stood there, watching the doorway of her bedroom. I did not go back in. I just stood there, watched, and listened. When I finally had the courage to climb into bed, I didn't sleep. Sunday, I told my wife everything. I told her about the first time I saw this woman. I told her about calling out to her and seeing her from the window. I told her how she had appeared in our daughter's closet. She told me it wasn't funny, and that it was my fault that our daughter's having bad dreams, that I shouldn't encourage her to be afraid of her own closet. Sunday night, my daughter called me from her room again. Call me a coward, but I couldn't go back into that room. I called her quietly to get in our bed, but she cried and said that she was scared. I wanted to go and get her, but I was scared. I told her to pull the blankets up and cover herself. "Just cover yourself, honey, and you'll be okay." I prayed that it was true. I lay there, peeking over the sleeping form of my wife and out into the hallway at the closed door of my daughter's room, and I just kept praying. I heard her cry for a while longer. Then she went quiet and I hoped that she was asleep. Monday, I piled toys in front of the door to her closet. By that time, there was no doubt in my mind that there was some sort of ghost or apparition. But I piled these things in front of her closet anyway. Like a pile of toys would actually stop a fucking ghost. Monday night, my daughter did not cry, but I didn't sleep. I lay there, looking at the ceiling, tense. Around 2 a.m., I heard her bedroom door creak open, and I knew something was wrong. She must be scared, I thought. So I called her, like before. "Just come to me, and you can come sleep in our bed, sweetie." But she didn't come. I peeked over my wife. The woman was standing there in the doorway to my daughter's bedroom. Her arms hung at her side, her shoulders slouched down. Her gown was dirty, like it hadn't been washed in years, and hung off her like torn rags. I wasn't breathing. I wasn't blinking. I just looked at her, and she looked at me, and I thought, this is it. I'm going to die. She never moved, never made a sound. I whispered, "Please, go away. Please leave me alone. Please, I'm sorry." I couldn't look away. If I look away, she will get closer. I was sure of it. If I close my eyes, when I open them, she'll be standing over me, looking at me. At some point, she was gone. It's like I fell asleep and my eyes opened. I don't remember her disappearing, just that I was looking at the doorway, and she wasn't there anymore. Last night, I lay awake, waiting. I asked my wife to shut our door because the nightlight in the hallway was keeping me awake. It was stupid. I don't know what I was thinking. Like clockwork, I heard my daughter's bedroom door creak open. I held my breath. Then I heard the floorboards in the hallway creaking, and I started shaking uncontrollably. I heard our bedroom door open, and I knew she was standing there in the doorway, not moving, just looking at me. I didn't look. I couldn't. I did what I had told my daughter to do and pulled the covers over my head. I am a complete mess, a zombie at work. I don't want to go home anymore. I think I see that woman in other places now. A glance while driving and I think that she's in the passenger seat of the truck, or behind me, or standing down the street as I drive off. Just sitting here at my desk. Someone passes by behind me and I jump. I'm afraid that if I turn around, she'll be there, waiting for me to look at her. What if I did see her face? I didn't want to see it. I don't want to see her anymore. But I don't know what to do. The only hope I feel is that, for unrelated reasons, my wife is talking about moving, but our lease isn't up until May. I don't know if I can hold out for that long. I worked as a flight attendant for a few years when I decided to take an extended sabbatical from college. There were a handful of L&M situations I encountered, but one particular one still makes my skin crawl more than any of the others. I was born and raised in Texas, but had moved to New York when I was 21. So when I found out in the beginning of the week-long trip that I'd have a couple of overnights in Austin, I was super excited to be able to go to my home state for a few days. My brother lived in the north side of the city, and we had planned to hang out and go grab dinner when I arrived that night, after he got off work. And the following day we were going to meet up with our dad, who lived about an hour away. So I get to the hotel downtown. The crew and I check in, and we each head off to our own rooms. Short elevator ride and I get to mine. Where not even 5 minutes later, there's a loud, hard knock on the door. It was only around like 1 or 2 p.m., and I hadn't called either my dad or my brother to let them know that I had gotten into town yet, so they wouldn't know what room. I assumed it was maybe one of those crewmates, so I headed to the door. Before even making it to the door, however, a loud male voice on the other side boomed. "The front desk sent me about some bathroom problem you called in." Before I even tried to open the door, "Unlock the door and open up, miss. I need in now." I froze in my tracks. I hadn't even been to the bathroom yet, let alone called anything to the front desk. I'm a petite chick, and while I take no shit from anyone, despite my size, I stayed on the caution side, slowly inching towards the door to look out the people. All I could tell was that it was a man on the other side, at least 6 feet tall, and easily double my weight. No way in hell I was going to unlock that door. I responded to the guy, telling him that he must have the wrong room. He continued pounding on that door, while continuously turning the handle, telling me no. He needed in and was getting into the room one way or another. I panicked, but thankfully, I had the sense to grab my phone and call the front desk, The concierge confirmed that they had not sent anyone up there, nor had received any phone calls about this bathroom. The entire time, this fucking guy was still determined to get into my room, pounding and yelling. Luckily for me, the front desk had dispatched security, and they sent them to my floor. When the security officer stepped off the elevator a few seconds later, I can hear them in the hallway approach and ask the guy who he was, what he was doing, and telling him he needed to leave the hotel. He immediately gets hostile and aggressive towards them, and the front desk clerk I'm still on the phone with tells me that the police have been called, and they are on their way. In the meantime, I'm trapped in my room, scared shitless. Long story short, the cops show up pretty quickly, and manage to arrest this guy for trespassing and criminal menacing or some shit. I later found out that the guy was also wanted in connection to the string of break-ins and violent sexual assaults in Austin. He had seen and stalked me since the minute I entered the hotel. Apparently, I was exactly his type of victim. Nothing else happened after that, but it still rattled the fuck out of me for the rest of my stay in that hotel. When I was about 10, my family of 6 lived in an extremely small apartment. 2 bedrooms upstairs, and then there's the living room. When I was tired of my siblings, I would sleep downstairs on the couch. One night I am lying on the couch, facing the front door and watching the sky through the window. By the door, when a face shows up in the window, illuminated by a lighter. I freeze, and the face goes away. I'm pretty relieved, thinking it was maybe just our druggy neighbors, seeing if my parents were still awake. But then it shows up again. I try to scream, but when I opened my mouth, nothing came out. Not a sound. The person then kicks the door and walks in the room. He sees me, smiles, and goes towards the kitchen. The guy comes out of the kitchen with a knife, and now I'm close to tears. My dad must have heard all the commotion because he made his way down the stairs, and thankfully the guy boots it out of there. I still can't sleep easily on couches to this day. When I was 10 years old, my family relocated from Delaware to South Carolina for my dad's job. We lived near all of our family and had never moved before. One of my dad's selling points about the move was that people in the South are quote-unquote so friendly. I had just finished 5th grade and would be starting 6th grade in SC. I rode the bus to and from school in Delaware, and so there wasn't a lot of anxiety about riding the school bus after we moved. 6th grade started, and I was excited about my new school and loved my teacher. Dad was right. People in the South are polite and friendly. Well, I guess you could say most of them are. Anyway, one day in the fall I got off of the bus at my stop after school, and a man in a dark green Volkswagen Beetle that was behind the bus pulled off the main road and called out to me as I was walking toward my house. I turned around and probably even smiled at him. I had no stranger danger fears at the time. I walked up to his driver's side of his car to see what he wanted. I figured he was just wanting to ask for directions or something, and I planned to tell him that I had just moved here and didn't know. But oh boy, he didn't need directions. He was after something entirely different. He smiled at me and said something I didn't catch, comprehend, or understand, so I said, "What?" or "Excuse me?" to get him to repeat it. I got a little closer so I could hear him a little bit better. He said, so at the time, I didn't know what that word really meant, except that maybe I did, but I knew it was a bad word and I didn't want to. Whatever fuck meant. I turned and ran to my neighbor's house and didn't look back. I was crying and they called my mom, and my parents called the police about it. A couple of days later, the police department had a sketch artist come meet my parents and I at the station to work with me. I did the best I could, but honestly, I wasn't studying the man's features, or even trying to remember his face at the time, so I didn't know how accurate it would be. My parents and I thought that that was the end of it. Nobody really thought that they would find him. The cops were saying things like if they found him, he would go to jail for a while, for his obscene question to me. My mom was nervous that if it came down to it, they would have to go to court and testify, and she didn't feel good about putting me through that. She was worried that even as an undeveloped 10-year-old child, the defense would attempt to shame me in some way, or say I was asking for it. About a week later, I was again getting off of the bus, and I hear a car horn beep. I look to see, and it was the same guy. Same Volkswagen Beetle, smiling and waving at me. I was stunned. I blankly waved back for some reason, but at the same time memorized his tag number. I repeated it to myself over and over as I ran to my house to write it down and call my mom. Cops were notified, and the guy was identified. He lived about 20 minutes away in another town. His local cops knew him and were friendly with his family. The good old boy system. So he didn't go to jail, but apparently they told him to stay away from me. I never saw him again, and I hope to never do. I wonder how many times he might have followed that bus, watched me, and I never knew anything about it. So, dear pedo pervert predator, let's never meet again. There is definitely something up with the Appalachians. I've spent my life in Georgia and love hiking all over, but I must admit, North Carolina has been the best mountains. For this reason, I frequently drive up there and hike and camp. This time I went up with my family in an RV and stayed with them in Maggie Valley. The next day, however, I had them drop me off about 10 miles away from the cold mountain trailhead, and I planned to hike up and spend the night and be back down in the morning. I was by no means inexperienced at hiking or camping, but I had never camped alone. On top of that, I didn't bring a pistol, something I won't go without now. On the way up, the trail was surprisingly strenuous. Not necessarily steep. I've hiked some steep stuff out west, but more like a ton of ups and downs and feeling it wouldn't end. Eventually it began to get darker, and I realized I needed to stop and set up while I still had some light. So I stopped about half a mile short of my summit and figured I would continue in the morning. Nothing eventful happened. I set up camp in a really good spot, ate my food, and just went into my tent. At this point, I realized I hadn't run into a single other person my entire way up. This wasn't eerie at the time, but soon would be. I have trouble sleeping and usually lay awake for up to an hour trying to sleep. During this, I thought I heard someone lightly walking around the general area because of the rhythm of the steps. I brushed it off as my mind just running wild, but I did pull out my big knife out of my bag and put it next to me in the sleeping bag. That morning I woke up and ate oatmeal. As I ate, I looked over at my tent and noticed a strange bundle of dried twigs and berries, tied with a green cord, propped against my tent. Internally, I was pissing myself, but I packed up my crap and took off within 5 minutes. In no way I bothered to go back to the summit. I headed straight down. On the way down, I realized there was a pretty heavy fog coming in, and I ended up on the side trail, and eventually ended up where I was lost. I used a compass to eventually reorient myself, and found the trail again. One of the biggest reliefs of my life. I made it out with no incidents. However, come to find out the same morning a 27-year-old died on the same section of the trail as me. And it's possible I would have run into him and not gotten lost and rejoin the trail later. His family seems to have scrubbed the internet of several of the articles of him, but I'll see if I can find something. The scariest part was knowing that someone knew where I was and watched me, and I had no clue about them. This is a true story about what happened to me. I live in a small village near Turnbridge, Wells in Kent, England. On one side of our village is a vast forest that has parts that are very thick with trees, and some parts that are large clearings. I usually walk there on the weekends, as it is relaxing and it calms me, but that changed last weekend. It was Sunday afternoon, and I was doing my usual route through the woods when I came upon lots of pieces of paper, all scattered in specific areas. There wasn't a breeze, so pieces of the paper hadn't blown off. There must have been about 50 pieces of paper, all with the same phrase on it, bringing you a laugh. I didn't really think much of it, and took a photo of it as a joke. I kept on walking, and 15 minutes later I came across another pile, all with the same phrase, bringing you a laugh. I took another picture and decided I would report it to the non-emergency number when I got home. When I looked up from taking the picture, I saw a bright flash of color in the tree line. I called out, "Hello? Who's there?" Nothing. I called out again, "Hello?" Again, nothing. I was thinking I was just seeing things, but when I moved on, I was cautious. Then all of a sudden, a clown jumped out from behind the tree. He had a latex mask that covered his head and was wearing bright yellow, purple, and red jumpsuit covered with blue polka dots. His mouth was revealed on the mask, and he grinned at me. To be honest, I was expecting him to have like crooked yellow teeth, and I was surprised when he flashed perfect, bright white ones at me. I was a bit taken back and stuttered out, "Who are you?" He giggled and said in a sing-song voice, "I'm Honky the Clown. I'm your best friend." He kept asking me questions about where I lived, what my name was, and if I locked my doors at night. I was kind of annoyed and said firmly, "This isn't funny. Leave me alone." He stopped grinning. "Not funny?" he said in an upset voice. "Not funny?" He kept repeating those two words, but he got more angry every time he said it. After the 5th repetition of the words, he was practically spitting in fuming anger. He then took a kitchen knife out of his back pocket. He lunged at me, and I dodged out of the way, but not fast enough. I didn't see that he cut me, but I looked down at my arm and saw a long, thin line appear on my skin, oozing blood. I let out a yelp and took one last look at him and sprinted away. I didn't know where I was going. I just wanted to get away. Nothing happened after that. I ran out of the woods, back home, and called the police instantly. I had completely forgot about my arm, and it was covered in blood by the time the police got here, and they sent for an ambulance. I took them to the place where the clown was, but he was gone, and so was the paper. I haven't seen him since. Now a week later, I feel safe to write about this here. The police investigated for a few days, asked a few questions, and they were gone by Wednesday. I still look over my shoulder as if the clown will be there, watching me, holding a knife. So these next two stories are actually by the same person who had multiple occasions. So this happened when my sister and I were kids, and we went hiking in the woods in our backyard in North Carolina. We only had a few neighbors around us, and our house was surrounded by the woods. It was a Saturday afternoon during the summer, and my sister and I decided to go hiking alone together, like we did quite frequently. We were both under the age of 8, but our parents let us go hiking alone. We loved exploring the forest and discovering new places. As we made our way through the woods, everything was fine at first. When we went to our favorite place in the woods, where we usually hung out, something didn't just feel quite right. I felt an uncomfortable feeling, like something was going to happen. I looked around at my surroundings, but I didn't see anything or anyone out of the ordinary. My sister and I continued walking through the woods until suddenly we heard leaves crunching behind us, so we turned around to see what it was. There was nothing there, so we thought at first it was just an animal. As we started hiking again, we heard leaves crunching, and as we turned around, we saw someone running to hide behind the trees. We could see their shadows coming from behind us, and it looked like a person. It was definitely not an animal. We both looked at each other and felt paralyzed by the fear. We started freaking out and thought this person was going to try to kidnap us. I grabbed my sister's hand and told her to run. We ran as fast as we possibly could back home. Once we made it home, we ran inside and told our parents. Our parents became worried and told us next time we go hiking, don't go too far away from the house anymore. I don't know who was following us, but it still freaks me out to this day. I don't know what they wanted or what they would have done if we hadn't run away. It was a nice autumn night, and my family and I decided that we would have a campfire. We went outside after it was dark, and we were roasting marshmallows and making s'mores while we sat around the campfire talking. The campfire was at the very edge of the woods, by our playground, which was quite far away from our house, since we had a lot of acres. We had spent time outside at night before, and everything was okay. But this night, we spent a few hours outside, and suddenly we heard something in the woods. We heard leaves crunching and sticks break. We thought it was an animal, so we ignored it. We went back to talking, and we heard it again. It sounded like it was getting closer and closer. The footsteps didn't sound like animals, and instead it sounded more like human. Then we heard someone cough in the woods. My family and I all stood up in silence because we were all freaked out. We shined our flashlights into the woods to see who or what it was. We saw a dark figure of a man hiding behind a tree. They were watching us. We left everything outside and ran as fast as we could back to the house. Once we were inside our house, we locked all the doors and the windows, and my family and I thought that the person had been watching us this entire time, and it must have been the same person that followed my sister and I while we were hiking. We were all scared, and still to this day, I had no idea who it was that was watching us, or what they would have done to us if we hadn't ran away. After this, we never had a campfire at night ever again, and instead we did it during the daytime. I live right next to a Navajo reservation and have made friends with many of the people there, my age. We like to hang out, play video games, and just the normal teens thing. I walk over there a lot since my best friend lives a little bit less than a mile away from me. This isn't a long trek, and usually only takes me about 25 to 30 minutes. I've made this trip dozens of times and have grown very comfortable with it. I know the people along this way, so I'm not really scared or on edge. There is a path of forest, however, about midway there. It's a little unnerving sometimes. There is always that feeling of being watched. This was a regular occurrence for me, so I tried to ignore it and shake it off, as my mind was playing tricks on me. This day I spent more time at my friend's house than I meant to, and when I left, it was already getting dark. I reached the stretch of the forest right as the sun disappeared from the sky. I shivered a little bit and readied myself to begin my journey through. I was about 10 steps in when I heard a branch snap. You know the sound, the one that screams there is definitely someone or something there with you. I froze, not sure what to do, and what should I do next? Should I run? Should I turn around and book it back to my friend's house? I didn't know my best option in this situation. I whispered, "Hello," hearing my voice crack as the words fell out from my lips. I don't know why I even opened my mouth, but it was out there, so I just listened for any reply. My heart sank when the answer came back in the sound of my voice. "Hello." I started to breathe too fast. My heart pounded against my chest. I felt like I might faint. "Hello." My voice came again, but not from my own mouth. I wanted to run, but my feet felt cemented to the ground. I couldn't even scream. I shouldn't reply. I couldn't reply, as my voice just echoed over and over from a short distance away. I couldn't pinpoint exactly where it was coming from. It sounded like it was everywhere all around me. "Hello. Hello. Hello." It repeated. "Stop it!" I finally managed to tear it from my lips. Everything went silent. For a long minute, nothing happened. The air grew stale, and I realized that for the first time, there were no typical forest sounds. There were no bugs, no frogs or crickets, nothing. I stood there, terrified, waiting to see what was going to happen next. "Stop it!" It mimicked back. I'd had enough and was willing my heavy legs to move. Before I could take a step, I heard rustling in the bushes about 20 feet away to my left. I watched in horror as a deer head and huge antlers protruded from this big bush. As it came further out, it stood on twos. I took off. I flew out of those woods and all the way home in record time. I said nothing to my mom when I got there. I just went up to my room, laid down, and thought about what just happened. Once I saw its head, that's all it took for me to run. My mother came in at some point and asked me if everything was all right. I replied that, yes, I was just tired. I just wanted to go to bed. I don't know why I didn't tell her. I guess I might have just been afraid of how she would have reacted. I called my friend and told him everything. He freaked out and told me no matter what, or what happened that night, to not reply or look out my window. This terrified me even more. He said to call him the next morning and that he would explain more, and that he had to speak to his grandfather as soon as possible. That night I didn't fall asleep at all. I stayed awake and listened to every little sound the night brought. Around 3 a.m., just as I was about to drift off, the air changed. The night sounds quieted. I felt my heart beginning to pound. I lay there and waited, pulling the covers over my head like a child, far too scared to move. It came after a long moment. "Hello." I just sat there and cried. It was all I could do. "Hello." Stop it. It mocked what I had said in the woods again. It was terrifying enough when it copied me, but then it did something new. It called my fucking name. Amy. In my mother's voice. "Amy. Amy. Come here." "Hello." Stop it. My voice again. For the rest of the night, the creature outside of my window called my name in my mother's voice and repeated what I had said in the woods over and over. In the morning, when the sun broke through the dark, it finally stopped. I finally fell asleep. I woke up around 12 to my friend calling me to tell me that he had spoken to his grandfather and could explain what happened to me. He said there was a creature that they called the... I don't know how to pronounce it, so I'm not going to try, but it translated to he who goes on all fours. Or, as a lot of people know, a skinwalker. He explained that it was an evil witch that used dark magic to transform into animals with the attributes it required. That it had caught my scent and knew me now. I was also given a warning that since it knew me, it would always follow me, that I would always have to be careful. Last night I heard scratching on my window, then a low hum. The creature began saying my name again, but also adding in things I hadn't said in my mother's voice. At one point, it started calling me by my name, but drawing it out really far like, Amy. It tried to get me to come outside, or to open my door and let it in my house. This went on all night. At this point, I feel like I'm going crazy. I don't know what to do. Is it seriously going to stalk me in the shadows and be around me for the rest of my life? I don't think I can take that much longer. It was after my Wendigo encounter in 2016 and my dog had died. In 2018, I was 18 and was told by my MEPS that I would be going to infantry school in Fort Benning, Georgia in 2019. I was told by my parents to walk the family dog. He's an 80-pound purebred chocolate lab named Coco. I decided to go to the same area as I usually went, as I haven't seen anything different. My roommate was there when I found the first sign of evidence. He traveled to one of the ponds that was on the course, and I found a weird set of tracks. It was like a large bird track, and then it slowed and morphed into like a dog or a coyote track. I asked my roommate about it, but he didn't know. I only had a small amount of data about it, but this matched up with a skinwalker. I know jumping to conclusions doesn't make sense, but just keep reading. The tracks changing in the snow to a different animal was the first sign that I didn't want to stick around and find this 150-pound coyote. We headed back to my house. We didn't speak of it again. The following day I went out to the same place, but this time I saw something in the distance. It looked human from the start, but as I got closer, I knew what it was. I watched it slowly turn into a wolf. I didn't want to make any sudden movements. The dog was scared shitless and lying helplessly next to me. I waited till it went away, but it didn't. It's like he knew I was there. About 10 minutes had passed, and he headed to the woods patch that was across the street. I decided to use this opportunity to run home. I never saw him again. I still go to that patch of woods. I went there in 2019 with my fiance and my family dog and saw nothing. It's weird as when I'm alone there, I find things, but when I'm accompanied, I don't. If I had any advice, I'd say to never travel in the woods or any place that has a lot of trees and places to hide alone. And if you travel alone, then bring something to defend yourself with. Stay safe. My name is Paul Johnson, fake name to keep privacy, and I live in a small town up in North Canada. My town's name is Rosewood, and the population is about 7,400-ish, and it is one of the most beautiful towns you'll ever see. My town has a freshwater river and a waterfall. It has hundreds of wooded forests surrounding it. I truly love my town, but it also horrifies me. My town is that town that you come in and you live after you retire, or you don't like being surrounded by many folks. So the thing that terrifies me about my town is that every night we hear screams from the forest, and whoever goes to investigate never comes back. 1/4 of the population of my town is Native American, and they say it is a skinwalker at night. I've done some research about these skinwalkers, and I wanted to see what was in the woods. I was curious to see if this thing was actually mystical, or this horrifying creature is real. And oh, how I regret going so much. I really do. So it was Friday night, and I told my friends what I was going to do. They all thought that I was just so brave to go, and my 15-year-old self fed into those bravery comments. My best friend Adam, Aloe, and Chayton, friends' names are fake to keep their privacy too, decided to come with me. They said to their parents that they were going to be having a sleepover at mine. My friends came around 6 p.m., and we watched some survival videos on YouTube, and also some stories about some skinwalkers. The time came and it was 9 p.m., and the night was dark with a full moon. It was casted with a pure light. We sneaked out of my bedroom through the window, and opened the front wooded gate and left for the woods. Aloe was wearing full hiking gloves, and he had cargo pants with different tools that we might need to use to survive just in case we got lost. And he wore a military-style belt to keep his pants up, as some of our survival necessaries were pulling his pants down. We laughed at that, definitely. Adam had a bag with him, and he told Aloe to put some of his necessaries in his bag, and he did. While I and Chayton were just normal clothes, Adam and Aloe were supposed to be the survival experts. That is why they were in their hiking clothes. We hiked into the forest for a good hour, and we started to get bored because we weren't finding a skinwalker. While we kept on walking on this dirt trail, Chayton told us to stop and be quiet, and so we did. He said, "Listen, there is absolutely no sound, no birds, leaves blowing, crickets chirping," and we then remembered that in the skinwalker videos, everything goes completely quiet before it comes to you. Aloe started to get scared and said, "Guys, I don't think this is a good idea anymore." Then Adam said sarcastically, "Stop your moaning like a baby." Aloe then became quiet. All of a sudden we heard a branch snap and a low, deep growl. We looked in the direction that it was coming from, and we saw a pair of blood-red eyes. Aloe started running back the way we came, and we all followed after him. Adam kept on saying, "I knew it. I knew we should have not come. I fucking knew it." But I was terrified. But I was also fascinated that these used to be witch doctors, and now they're just some demon creature from hell. I was, of course, the last running, as I am not athletic, and I kept on hearing growls and grunts right behind me. At one point I felt the skinwalker's damp, warm air right on the back of my neck. That made me even run faster. Suddenly I tripped over a stone, a fucking stone, and fell to the ground. I started to cry and yell for the creature to release its strong grip off of my leg. I pleaded. I cried and prayed to God to help me. I cried to myself, and I said, "This is how I'm going to die." Until I heard the creature scream with agony and pain as it let go of my leg, and I saw Chayton had stabbed it in the hip with his pocket knife. Adam rushed to me and picked me up while Aloe was still running back the way we came. Once I got up, Adam, Chayton, and I ran as fast as lightning. You could hear the creature cry and scream in pain. I looked behind me and looked straight at it. In its eyes, I saw a bit of humanity, and I felt bad. I truly did, but then my anger came in and said that it had tried to harm me, or even tried to kill me, so it got what it deserved. We finally reached the entrance of the forest, and saw Aloe sitting there crying, saying that he was so sorry that he ran off. We forgave him and went back to my place. My adrenaline rush was so powerful that I didn't even feel or notice that my leg was bleeding. So I went to the bathroom and took a shower to clean it off. I cleaned my wound and put medical tape over it, as my bathroom had a medical kit in it. After I finished in the bathroom, my friends took their turns taking a shower and healing their wounds too. We then talked about what happened with the skinwalker and vowed not to tell anyone. But here I am, a week later, and writing what happened to my friends on Reddit. Things haven't been the same since I almost lost the love of my life after a fatal incident. Recently, my wife, Eliana, was diagnosed with kidney failure and had been on the transplant list for over a year. Her condition wasn't improving as we found out that her immediate family, as well as myself, were ineligible to donate a kidney to her. Her blood type was rare, and even with a universal blood type, the waiting list was long and arduous. Watching her go through dialysis on the one last still functioning kidney shattered my heart to see her so sick and in the worst pain I'd ever seen her in. Holding her hand in the hospital as she weaved in and out of consciousness, it just made me feel worthless. Like I couldn't do anything to help her, except physically sit there by her bedside. That's when I knew I needed to do something more. Something to get my wife back to the way she used to be, or as close to it as humanly possible. I had to stop praying for a miracle and just do something about it. I just didn't know what to do. While Eliana was laying in bed, with her back towards me, I touched her arm gently as tears just streamed down my face. I wasn't ready to say goodbye to my wife just yet. And that's when I had a morbid idea. It popped into my head. I recalled an in-depth conversation a coworker of mine and I had at lunch that made me almost choke on my sandwich. "You ever heard of the dark web?" he whispered across the table to me. "Only in passing. What is it?" I inquired. "Think of it as like your ticket. Yeah, your ticket of getting your wife's name moved up on the organ donor list." He gave me a side-eyeing glance and nodded slightly. I was taken back. I didn't know what to say. "Dude, what are you talking about? You may just have to see for yourself. Obviously not on the work computers, but I'll write down a site where to go. Do it for Ellie." He took a scrap piece of paper out of his shirt pocket and scribbled down my ticket to getting Eliana the help she truly needed. Getting home that night, as Eliana sat in her comfy clothes while watching television on the couch, I came up behind her and kissed her on her neck gently. She weakly looked up at me and smiled sweetly. It may be my last chance to make things right for her before she leaves me to the great beyond. We talked about putting her in hospice to keep her as comfortable as possible, but I didn't have the guts to do it. Hospice was for old people, not someone who still had their whole life ahead of them. We wanted to start a family, but her prognosis shot that down real quick, keeping our focus on getting her moved up on the transplant list. Sitting in the family room, I pulled up an old computer, and I didn't mind things getting fucked up on it. The dark web is a scary place to explore, especially if you have never been there before. Just about everything or anything can be found on there, from drugs to sex to hiring hitmen, and chat rooms that lead you down a dark, debaucherous place called red rooms. I could feel the color drain out of my face as I felt like the police were going to raid my house any minute, just for even opening the tab. I've heard of dark web horror stories, and people getting followed and killed and unsuspecting people from the inner sanctions of some of these sites, or their computers getting hacked and contaminated with this plethora of viruses known to man, and some unknown. Although I was extremely comfortable doing this, Eliana's gaze caught my attention. I could hear her coughing from the room over, and I was instantly reminded of the reason I was doing this in the first place. I knew she would kill me if she knew what I was doing for her. I recalled a conversation we had while Ellie was at one of her dialysis appointments. She looked so fragile and sick. She could barely keep her head up. I gently took her hand and held it for a while, rubbing my thumb against the base of hers. A small smile appeared across her face as she turned to look at me, her tired eyes making my heart just sink deeper into my stomach. "Will you miss me when I'm gone?" she half whispered to me. "Honey, what kind of question is that? Of course I'd miss you. You're my everything. I want you to be happy when I go. Find yourself another love of your life and shower her with as much affection and desire you've done with me. Can you promise me that?" She leaned her head against my shoulder as a single tear rolled down the bridge of her nose. Closing my eyes and breathing in the scent of her hair, I kissed her gently and tried not to cry myself. "You're not gonna die on me. That I promise you. If it's the last thing I ever do with my life, you will not die under my watch. I love you, babe." As I was brought back to reality, I drew in a deep breath and shook my head, covering my face with my hands. Bucking up the bit of courage I could muster, I continued to scroll through the never-ending links of absolute worst possible things I've ever seen. I did my best to keep mission-focused, but I know for a fact there are things that are on the dark web that I'll never be able to unsee, no matter how hard I try. Suddenly, that's when I saw it. Exactly what the doctor didn't order. And here it was, staring in front of me. Organs for sale. Feeling the air escape from my body, I couldn't believe how expensive organs truly are on the dark web. I knew deep down there was absolutely no way I was going to be able to afford just a sliver of a kidney, and I just about gave up hope completely. That's when a text box appeared on my screen, out of nowhere, and I thought I was going to fly out of my seat. "Are you finding what you're looking for?" I started the shipwrecks as my anxiety was going absolutely haywire. With shaky hands, I thought about just slamming down the laptop screen and getting the hell out of there. I knew it was too late. I was pretty sure whoever was sending me messages already had my IP address and started tracking my activity. That's when another message appeared as my skin began to crawl. "I know you're still there. What are you looking for?" Swallowing a large lump that formed in my throat, I grew a set of balls and typed back, "I need a kidney." Seeing those three dots indicating someone was typing on the other end, I bit down hard on my lip as my foot started tapping quietly on the hardwood floor. Blood type: AB negative. Rarity: you must be desperate. I scoffed at their response, but kept my cool before typing back. "I can't afford what you're asking, but I need a kidney for." I couldn't bring myself to type out what I was going to say. That it was for my wife. Call me whatever you want, but I knew I probably gave out more information than needed to be shared. That's when I read something that made my blood run cold. "I think we can work something out. Transfer what you can into Bitcoin, and we'll take care of the rest." We? Who's we? I wanted to ask, but I knew I wouldn't get the answer I was looking for. But Ellie didn't have much time. My patience was wearing thin, but I knew what needed to be done. Ellie was my #1 priority as I thought about our wedding day and the vows we exchanged. In sickness and in health, till death do us part. This was for Ellie. Now it was time for me to take up my end of the vows. Converting what I could into Bitcoin and transferring the money over, a confirmation flashed on my screen with a cryptic message beneath with coordinates. "Meet us here, at this address, and come alone within 48 hours. We will know if someone is with you. See you soon. The power to my computer flickered off, and that was it. My fate was sealed. Leaning back in my chair as tears began to pour down my face, I muffled my cries so Ellie couldn't hear them. I gathered my courage, took hold of my laptop, and threw it away outside. 48 hours. I had 48 hours to get my shit together. But nothing could have prepared me for what was going to happen next. I stayed home from work and racked my brain around the message that I had seen. The one that stuck out with me was, "We'll work something out." I had a horrible gut feeling about all of this, but it was too late to back out. Whatever money was in our bank account was gone, as it's now in the hands of someone from the dark web. I could feel my paranoia writhing through me as Ellie's voice broke my worry. "Hey, are you okay?" Her tired eyes looked over at me as I simply nodded. "Babe, come here." Sitting next to her on the couch, my trembling hands took a hold of hers as I gave them a gentle squeeze. "Everything's gonna be okay, Ellie," I whispered to her. "I promise I'm gonna take care of everything." "I know it is, honey. You don't have to worry. We've got this." Her soft, breathy voice almost made me spill my guts about what I was going to do. But I knew she would never forgive me. In that moment, the less she knew, the better. And that was how everything would play out. At least that's what I told myself. On the day that I was meeting at the address that I had deciphered, I asked Ellie's mom if she could stay with her while I was gone for a short business trip. Her mother detested about this, but there was nothing I could do. Giving Ellie a kiss on the forehead, and with a heavy sigh, I whispered in her ear one last time, "I'll be home as soon as I can, Ellie. I love you." Bidding my mother-in-law goodbye with my bags in hand, I took off for the parts unknown. The whole ride there, I couldn't help but glance at my rearview mirror, just expecting some vehicle to be tailing my every move. 3 towns over, I pulled onto a dark, desolate side road, where the only building around was an old steel factory. Another vehicle was parked in the front entrance, as I reluctantly decided to park ways back, in the event I would be making a run for it. But who was I kidding? If they're going to kill me, they would do it, and I accepted that. Closing out of my GPS on my phone, Ellie's face stared back at me as my screensaver faded to black. There was absolutely nothing to lose at this point, except for my life. With a loud thud of my car door reverberating around me, someone stood out of the shadows of a side door, dressed in all black. My first inclination was the guy was a Fed, and I was in some serious shit. That's when I heard my name ring out from this man's lips. "Eric, follow me." My fight or flight instincts kicked into overdrive. How the hell did he know my name? That's when I remembered that more than likely, whoever this was knew absolutely everything about me. Where I worked, lived, date of birth, everything. Following behind him, 2 more men slid out of the darkness and were right on my heels. This was it. I was going to die trying to buy a kidney for my wife. Loud footsteps echoed all around us, and one of the men from behind grabbed me by my shoulder and pushed me into the office, slamming the door behind me. Looking around nervously, an old gentleman's voice was heard from a wooden chair in the corner of the office. "So you need a kidney?" The man's voice boomed. Yes, sir," I managed to stammer out. "I want to help you, but we have a bit of a problem with your insufficient funds." My heart dropped to my feet as I shifted nervously. "Yes, I knew there would be an issue, but that's all the money I have, and Say no more, son. You'll get your kidney. The man's voice trailed off, but not without a price. My bottom lip began quivering as he started to walk towards me. My brain was telling me to run, but my body was frozen in place. The old man looked at me, dead in the eye. His yellow teeth shone, and breath reeked of weeks of cigars. I swallowed nervously as I held my breath. All I could do was nod and try not to freak out. You see, son, you'll need to pay off your debt with me. I was so kind as to pay for the difference so that your wife could live. My face dropped. My eyes grew wide. The man scoffed in a low growl. Eliana, your wife. Oh, I know all about her. That's why my heart goes out to both of you. You see, I have a daughter her age, and I couldn't bear to see her go through what Ellie is going through. So I paid the rest. Now you just do something for me. What might that be? You have to come to work. For me. Wait, what? That's right. You want a kidney? You have to get it yourself, son. But I've never... My voice caught in the back of my throat. That's why you'll be working with one of my best. Take you under his wing. You get your kidney and experience. You're going to work for me, or you'll never see your wife again. And I'll make damn sure your bloodline ends. Do I make myself absolutely clear? Yes, sir. I calmly breathed out as he raps on the chair loudly as it's being dragged out from underneath me and thrown into a black SUV I had seen earlier. My mind was racing. Everything was happening at once, and I knew I'd just sold my soul to the devil. I kept my head down the entire drive. All I wanted to do was to go home and be with my wife, but I knew I was in too deep to get out alive. After saying a silent prayer to myself, the driver grumped, and we reached our destination. Glancing upwards, we were in front of a beautiful, ornate building with spires and stained glass. A church. What were we doing here? Suddenly, I was being pulled back onto my feet again and had my head shoved down towards the ground. I wondered if this was where I would meet my demise. Being dragged through the large oak doors with a harsh slam, we were greeted by another gentleman in a dark gray robe with red emblems. My thoughts shifted from this place being a house of God right out the window. The elder led us downstairs into a chamber where there were tables with drained openings and a faint smell of disinfectant, or maybe even preserving fluids that wafted through the place. I had a horrible sick feeling in the pit of my stomach as David, the man who was taking me under his wing, whispered something to my ear. Don't freak out. When he wheels the body out, he won't feel a thing. Shock and disgust took me over as I realized the line of work the old man had in mind. Suddenly the set of double doors swung open as a lady dressed in blue scrubs wheeled a young man in, probably around Ellie's age, and set him in front of one of the draining tables. The other men that were with us took both sides of the guy and placed him in the middle of the table. I honestly couldn't tell if the guy was even alive or dead, but I just wanted to get the hell out of there. The nurse started hooking him up to all sorts of cords and monitors, checking his vitals as they were preparing him for surgery. That's when I noticed out of the corner of my eye a video camera, particularly placed off to the side of the table. I've heard about what goes on with these events on the dark web, and I knew I was going to be part of a Red Room show. As the nurse checked his vitals one final time and gave the all clear to David, our eyes met and nodded. The elder in the gray robe turned on the camera, and it was showtime. I felt the color drain from my face, and I thought I was going to hit the floor or vomit all over my shoes. In a whirl, The elder started talking in front of the camera, as I'm the one being all gowned up. The nurse stood beside me and tried to get my attention. My jaw was hitting the floor. She handed me a scalpel and showed me exactly where I needed to make the incision. In the back of my mind, I knew this whole thing was fucking nuts. And this was so wrong on so many levels. This poor guy lying on this table probably got himself into a similar mess I had with this dark web mafia, and paid the price by having his kidney removed. Suddenly I was overcome by an odd sensation that I couldn't explain. A calm washes over me as I take the scalpel and slice into his side. As the heart monitor beeps quieted down around me, I focused on locating where to sever the lobe and extract the deep, dark, red lump of flesh that would save my wife's life. Placed beside me was a tiny white cooler, packed to the brim with ice, and a biohazard baggie opened, ready to receive the still warm organ as the remaining blood pours over my gloves and onto the concrete floor in little droplets. I did it. I got the kidney. I couldn't believe it. Now it was time and I needed to get Ellie to the hospital as soon as possible. As I turned to look back at David to take me back to my car, a hand roughly slapped my shoulder as I stopped in my tracks. I turned to look and it was the elder. "Where do you think you're going?" growled in my ear. "I'm leaving. I was promised this. Now I'm going to save my wife," I barked. He glared at me, stared deep into my soul. "You're not going anywhere until you finish what you started." "What are you talking about? No, I'm getting out of here. My wife will die without this, and there's not much time. We've done this many times, and trust me, you've got time." I looked over at a laptop that displayed a poll that was going the entire time, and my heart sank. I knew what was going on now, and a decision was made for me without my knowledge. The viewers had voted. They wanted me to kill the man on the table. A bitter, angry expression crept over my face as I shook my head. "There's no way I'm doing this. That wasn't part of the deal," I shouted. "You owe a debt. Now it's time to pay," David stated across the room. "Just do it, man. You don't want to cause trouble with us. We win every time." What choice did I have? It was either kill or be killed. There was no way I was going to die here, especially after all I just went through to get my wife what she needed to live. Handing David the cooler and retaking the scalpel, I did what needed to be done. A guttural and carnal scream erupted from me as I murdered that guy in cold blood. I could feel blood spurting onto my face and on my PPEs, but I kept going. Those sick fucks wanted a show, and I had to give them what they wanted. As the flatline tone became imminent, I threw the scalpel to the floor, gave David a death glare, and said, "Take me to my car." Without another word, I walked out of the room, threw my PPEs on the floor, and stood beside the car. David rejoined me as I gritted my teeth and stared ahead. "He didn't have to die," I spit out. "Yes, he did," David stated. "That was the debt that was owed. Now you can give your wife her life back and live happily ever after." As David goes to open the door, I slammed it shut and shook my head. I want to do it again." "What do you mean?" David shot me a puzzling look before I could react. "I've got blood on my hands, and I know once I tell Ellie how she got this, she'll never forgive me. I can't go back home. I'm in too deep. What other jobs are out there?" David was taken back, but he knew exactly what I was getting at. "I'll talk to the boss. There's always other jobs to do." David slid into the car as I followed, clutching onto the cooler, back to where my car was parked. All the while, David was on the phone with the boss. Getting out of the car, I heard him call behind me. Eric, he's got another job for you. I guess taking out that one guy wasn't enough. I understood and nodded, knowing that my life had been changed forever. I changed my clothes from the overnight bag and drove like a bat out of hell back home. All the while, I called my mother-in-law and told her an incredible story. The story I stuck with was when I was driving home from my trip, the doctor called me and said they had a kidney and that they wanted us to be at the hospital ASAP. I could hear her blubbering on the other line as she was screaming at Ellie. Her prayers had been answered. Driving straight to the hospital, I handed the nurse a cooler and said I had a kidney for Eliana Weller, and she was on her way to the hospital. "Sir, please wait." I could hear her yelling at me, but I kept walking. I needed to get out of there as fast as possible. Sitting out in my car waiting for them to arrive. It wasn't long before Ellie and Laura were practically running into the ER as my phone began to ring, answering as if I had no idea what was going on. I assured Laura I would be there as soon as I could. Hours passed as I waited, in sheer anxiety for Ellie to be out of surgery. As luck would have it, that night, our surgeon was on call to perform her surgery without any problems. This was the moment that we had been hoping and praying for, but it cost an innocent man his life. He didn't have to die. But what else could I have done? My phone rang again as Laura called me to say that Ellie was in recovery. I sighed deeply and gripped my steering wheel, contemplating whether or not to go in or leave. Tears of anger and regret poured out of me as my heart shattered at the decision that I had to make. I knew it was the right thing to do, but Ellie would be left asking questions about what happened to me. Putting my car into drive, I took off down the road for parts unknown once again. Now that I knew Ellie was safe and going to live a happy life with her new kidney, I could move on with this new chapter in my life. In time, I'd tell her everything once I've paid off my debt to the dark web. Now, if you made it to the end of this video, I wanted to say thank you for watching and I really hope you enjoyed it. Check out the links in the description, like my Twitter, Instagram, everything like that is in there, including my Gmail if you would like to submit a story. I would love to tell some subscriber stories. Trust me, I'm waiting for the day that I get a whole bunch. Haven't really gotten many, but I'm still working through all of the stories I've been sent. And also, if you would like to become a channel member, make sure to check that out as well. It just went live just 2 days ago, so make sure to check that out if you want to see more bonus or exclusive content. And I'm probably going to end up uploading a bloopers content as well, if you guys would like to hear that. But other than that, stay safe, stay scary, and I'll see you in the next one. And hopefully my schedule will stay consistent, because I'm not really sick.